This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're looking at a stack of sources that, frankly, challenge everything we think we know about Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel.
That's right. When most people think of Hegel, they go straight to his Encyclopedia of the Philosophical Sciences.
That massive three-part system.
Exactly. Logic, philosophy of nature, and philosophy of spirit. And the traditional view is that this is, his grand attempt to just diagram the entire universe. Absolute truth, all of human history, all in one book.
A kind of monument of pure, abstract thought. But the sources we have today, they point to a really radical alternative.
They do. They suggest this grand diagram was also doing something much more, practical and much more powerful.
So that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to unpack the evidence that the encyclopedia wasn't just a theory of truth, it was a highly sophisticated power map.
A power map and an organizational chart all rolled into one. And it was designed specifically for the 19th century German university.
And through the university, for the Prussian state bureaucracy itself. The goal was stabilization.
He was, in a sense, a university system designer. And his philosophy was the ultimate tool for creating an academic hierarchy that served the state.
That completely reframes him. It pulls him out of the clouds and right into the world of administration. Okay, let's unpack this. So to really get why Hegel's system was so revolutionary, we have to understand the context. There was a sort of institutional war going on for decades before he arrived in Berlin.
A long-fought battle. And the placement of the philosophy faculty, which Hegel led at the very top of the university, that wasn't an accident.
No, it was the final move in a huge political and intellectual struggle.
And the sources call this struggle the long-held ambition. It's a story that really starts with his predecessors. It's all about freeing philosophy from the control of theology.
And that kicks off with Kant, right? The Enlightenment giant.
It does. Immanuel Kant, he initiates what you could call the Declaration of Independence for philosophy.
Because before him, theology was in charge.
Completely. The Faculty of Theology was the undisputed head of the university. Kant's big move was to argue for the autonomy of the philosophy faculty, for intellectual freedom from religious dogma.
Okay, so Kant carves out a space for philosophy to be free. Then what does Fichte do?
Johann Gottlieb Fichte takes that freedom and he takes the ball and runs with it. His contribution is what we can call the dream of institutionalization.
So not just free, but in charge.
Exactly. Fichte didn't just want philosophy to be independent. He wanted it to be the foundational organizing principle for the entire university and for the modern state itself.
He provides the principle of the state then. But he doesn't quite manage to build the system. How did Hegel finally complete this ambition?
This is the genius of the move. Hegel doesn't make an argument based on institutional politics, Our department deserves more funding.
Which never works.
Right, it's messy. He argues for supremacy based on philosophical necessity. He designs a system where the academic hierarchy seems to be the only possible structure of the world.
He makes it seem inevitable.
So he takes Kant's principle of freedom, Fichte's principle of the state, and synthesizes them into this unassailable principle of university order. Philosophy has to be on top because it's the only field that understands the whole structure.
That is a brilliant move.
Yeah.
He's not just asking for power. He's deriving the necessity of his power from the structure of reality itself.
That's it in a nutshell.
Okay, so let's drill down into that famous three-part structure, logic, nature, spirit. Because the sources show this isn't just abstract, it's an almost literal map of the German university.
A direct correspondence. Especially the Berlin University model, which was, let's be clear, an engine for producing civil servants for the state.
It was a training academy. So how does the encyclopedia map onto that academy?
We can basically read it as an academic organizational chart. It tells you which faculty goes where and, more importantly, why.
Let's start at the beginning. The logic.
The logic is the foundation, and it maps directly onto the Faculty of Arts.
The basic curriculum.
Right. It provided the foundational concepts, the methodology, all the mental tools you needed before you could go on to specialize. It's the intellectual skeleton for everything else.
Okay, that makes sense. And the philosophy of nature. That seems like a pretty straightforward one.
It's the most direct mapping, yeah. The philosophy of nature is the natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology.
And these were new fields at the time, weren't they?
They were just emerging from the broader Faculty of Arts. So Hegel's system gives them a place, it integrates them, but it also defines their philosophical limits. It puts them in their box, so to speak.
And then we get to the big one, the philosophy of spirit, this is where the human world and the state comes in.
This is the main event. It integrates the humanities and the social sciences. And if you look inside it at the section on objective spirit.
That's where he talks about law, the state, ethics.
Precisely. And this is the philosophical justification for the faculty of law. This faculty was absolutely critical to the Prussian state.
They were training the actual administrators, the bureaucrats.
They were the ones concerned with state practice, with the civil service. They were building the apparatus of the state, and Hegel's system gave them their philosophical mandate.
So objective spirit trains the functionaries. But what about the section on subjective spirit, the part about psychology, education?
If objective spirit is the state apparatus, subjective spirit is the factory floor for producing the parts.
Creating the individuals to fill the roles.
Yes. It addresses the psychology, the anthropology, and especially the pedagogy, the educational process itself, that molds students into capable, loyal subjects ready to serve the state.
The whole thing is an assembly line for the perfect Prussian bureaucrat.
It's an incredibly coherent design.
Hold on. If the law faculty was so important, training the people who actually ran the state, why didn't they get the top spot? What did philosophy have that law didn't?
That is the million-dollar question, and it reveals Hegel's most brilliant maneuver. The law faculty, you see, it only deals with what is, with positive law. Philosophy, his philosophy, claimed to understand why it is and the rational concept behind it all. The final stage, the one that puts philosophy on top for good, is the absolute spirit.
Right. The final section. Art, religion, and philosophy. Tell us how this locks in the hierarchy.
Okay, so the structure here is everything. Art or aesthetics is assigned directly to the philosophy faculty. That's one. Religion is assigned to the faculty of theology, its old rival.
He gives them their due?
He gives them their space. But then philosophy is defined as the ultimate court of appeal. It's the final stage of knowledge that comprehends both art and religion, and it's placed triumphantly back in his own department, the philosophy faculty.
But that move against theology is so subtle. I mean, he couldn't just abolish them.
No, that would have been politically impossible in a state like Prussia. So he didn't abolish them. He performed a philosophical demotion.
A demotion? How?
He assigns theology to what the sources call the stage of representation. In German, Vorstellung.
Okay, so for those of us listening, what does that actually mean in practical terms?
It means that the truth of religion, the truth in the Bible, in stories, in rituals, is only captured in images and symbols. It's not yet pure rational thought.
It's truth in a metaphorical form.
Exactly. And which faculty is responsible for translating those metaphors into pure rational concepts?
The philosophy faculty.
The philosophy faculty recovers the truth as concept, so he lets theology keep its building and its students, but he philosophically places it under his own department, which holds the final say on what is rationally true.
That's a bureaucratic knife fight, one with metaphysics.
It is institutional mastery, justified as the logical unfolding of the human spirit.
So, okay, we've seen the organizational chart. What made it so stable? The sources you sent argue it wasn't just this one-to-one mapping.
That's right. And this is the part that I think scholars have often overlooked. What made the system so powerful, so seemingly undeniable, is that Hegel performed a triple mapping. He layered this university org chart onto two other grand, powerful narratives that everyone already accepted.
A triple mapping. So 3 layers reinforcing the same structure. What's the first one?
The first reinforcing layer is mapping 1, the theological legacy. He gives the entire system a kind of moral and historical weight by echoing the most powerful story in Western civilization, St. Augustine's City of God. The entire encyclopedia is basically a secularized, rationalized version of Augustine's salvation history.
Wow. How does that mapping work?
Well, think about it. The logic is like the logos, God's eternal reason before the act of creation.
Okay.
The philosophy of nature is, quite literally, the created world.
And the philosophy of spirit.
That becomes a secular version of salvation history. It's the story of humanity's long, difficult journey towards self-consciousness and rational reconciliation in the ethical state. He basically hijacks the sacred authority of that narrative for his own system.
So he rebuilds the cathedral of knowledge, but he puts the philosophers in charge instead of the priests.
You've got it. And that brings us to the second reinforcing layer.
Mapping 2, the philosophical history synthesis.
Right. He couldn't just invent this out of nowhere. He had to show it was the logical culmination of all modern philosophy. So he doesn't reject his predecessors, Kant and Fichte. He reorganizes them.
He absorbs them into his system, How does he use Fichte?
He takes Fichte's core idea, the self-positing of the ego, this idea of consciousness creating itself, and he turns it into the dynamic engine for the entire dialectical movement in the logic. He uses Fichte's engine to give his own system its unstoppable forward momentum.
So Fichte provides the motor. What about Kant? How does he fit in?
Kant provided the problem that needed solving. Famously, Kant had divided human experience into 3 separate spheres. You had pure reason for science, practical practice for morality, and aesthetic judgment for art.
And these spheres were separate.
Fundamentally separate.
Yeah.
And institutionally, that's a problem. It doesn't give you a unified university curriculum. So Hegel's philosophy of spirit is basically a grand administrative solution to Kant's philosophical divisions. He integrates them.
He takes Kant's separate pieces and builds a coherent structure with them.
Yes, and critically, that final section, the absolute spirit, becomes the ultimate reconciliation point. Art, religion, philosophy, the things Kant left divided, are finally brought together under one conceptual roof.
It's incredible. So it's like he has 3 transparencies. One is Augustine's sacred history. The second is the Kant-Fichte philosophical debate. And the third is the org chart for the University of Berlin.
And he lays them one on top of the other. And where they all line up perfectly, that's his system. It seems necessary from every angle, theologically, philosophically, and administratively.
Which brings us to the big so what? How did this system actually function in the real world?
Well, we have to connect it back to the immediate political reality. The Holy Roman Empire had just collapsed. The German territories were fractured. Prussia was aggressively trying to consolidate its power through a centralized, efficient bureaucracy.
And for that, you need bureaucrats. Lots of them.
You need a reliable machine to produce them. The sources are very clear on this. Hegel's system provided the philosophical justification for turning the university into what they call a bureaucratic training apparatus.
It gives the state a rational, philosophically sound assembly line for producing loyal and competent civil servants.
And this reading, I think, it pulls Hegel out of this abstract realm of pure thought and puts him where he belongs, in the history of institution building and state administration.
It really changes the central question, doesn't it?
It does. The conversation shifts. The traditional view is that the encyclopedia is the system of the world's truth. This new interpretation says no, it is the system of who holds the final judgment within the university.
It's an optimization model.
It's an optimization model for the primary intellectual factory of the 19th century state.
So when we read Hegel today, what does this all mean for us?
I think it means we have a new, and I would argue a much more powerful lens for understanding him. You have to see his work as a synthesis of 3 histories all at once.
So the theological history from Augustine.
The university institutional history from Kant and Fichte.
And the bureaucratic state history of Prussia. The system is born at the intersection of those 3 forces.
And for me, what's really striking is how this shifts our whole approach. We move from the history of ideas, what did Hegel think, to the history of how ideas were used. What institution did he build with those ideas?
And that really sets up the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away from this.
Go on.
If Hegel's grand claim to universal truth was, at its core, an architecture for a very specific 19th century institution, the state's bureaucratic training academy, then how many of our modern academic disciplines, the ones that claim objective universal truth today, might actually be functioning as hidden maps?
Hidden maps that justify the current hierarchies of power, whether they're political, corporate, or technological.
It encourages you to look for the administrator hiding behind the philosopher.
And the org chart hiding inside the concept.
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.